Yeah, but go ahead and finish up. If you want.
Oh, no, it's a 10-minute story.
Oh, then forget that.
We'll do it on the break.
All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order on time. I assume this will be a very short meeting tonight. Can I get roll call, please?
Chairperson Kimbrough.
Here.
Vice Chair Bonkowski.
Here.
Member Alt.
Here.
Member Bagwell.
Here.
Member Erb.
Here.
Member McQuarrie.
Here.
Member Stedfield.
Here.
Member Rosenberg.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Great, thank you. I don't think there's any changes to the agenda. Would there be, Lucia, from 2 to 1 and 1?
No, Mr. Chair, not today.
Are there any disclosures for the items on today? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. If there's anybody from the public like to come forward on any item, go ahead, Lucia.
If there are no public comments, if I may, I wanted to use this opportunity to introduce the CAMPO board to Carissa Moffett. She is the city's and CAMPO's new bicycle and pedestrian coordinator.
Oh, great.
She comes to us from Florida. When we did the interviews, she did them on Skype, which generally, in my estimation, gives folks a little bit of a disadvantage. It's kind of hard to get to know someone, but we fell in love with Carissa right away. We made her an offer. She drove out here by herself, and she's totally excited about being part of our community, so we're really excited. I didn't know, Carissa, if you wanted to say anything or introduce yourself, but...
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm your new bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, and I'm so excited to join Carson City. I've been exploring by my bicycle and just getting to know the area and all the fun activities that you have here. It's such a lovely community, and I'm so happy to be part of it. Yeah, if you guys ever want to talk shop about transportation or give me recommendations on things to do, I welcome you to reach out to me anytime. You can email me at kmoffett@carson.org or give me a phone call at 775-283-7525. Cool. Well, that's all that I have. Cool.
So you have snow tires on your car from Florida?
What is that? Just kidding. I do on my bicycle.
Oh, there you go. That's all you need then.
But my vehicle, yeah, that's a whole other game. Would you like to show me?
There's a AmeriCorps program up like for years. We used to spend half a day every year with AmeriCorps from the East Coast teaching them how to put chains on. So there is a learning curve, but
yes,
because most people from the East Coast or from Florida don't have four-wheel drive, so most of them.
Lucky me, my Jeep does.
Oh, there you go.
Yes,
You're okay
yes.
then. You're a step ahead. Well, welcome aboard. We're excited.
Thank you. Feel very welcomed. And I joined a really great team too, and also a department at Public Works. So.
They're a great team to be part of. So.
Yes, indeed. Cool. Well,
anything else?
You're welcome.
Nope, we won't pick on her anymore. That's pretty good. You got away.
I want her to leave.
That's right. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so that's nobody from the public, so we'll move beyond that, I guess. So we got some minutes in the package. So I got a motion or any changes?
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization for August 8, 2018, as presented.
Second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimous. We'll move to public meeting, 6A, to approve the fiscal year 2019 transit asset management performance targets.
Thank you,
Graham.
Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Graham.
Just a quick background. So the FTA requirement for establishing annual performance targets is relatively new. It was established with the previous transportation bill and reaffirmed by the current one, the FAST Act. These targets must be set for all capital assets used in the provision of transit service and must be reported annually to the National Transit Database. So the performance targets we have, they've got to be established for each asset class. The asset classes are rolling stock, equipment, and facilities. The FTA has also established methods by which assets must be assessed using age for vehicles and condition for facilities and certain types of equipment. A performance target is being proposed for each relevant asset class based on these guidelines. So a performance target of 20% is recommended for rolling stock assets, since it's forecast that 20% of the Jump Around Carson vehicles will have met the FTA's default acceptable age by the end of the fiscal year. The equipment asset category is set at 100% because the loan asset in this category has already exceeded its default acceptable age. However, it is in good operating condition and is not projected to be replaced by the end of the year or be in need of replacement either. And then a performance target of 0% is recommended for the facilities asset class, since it's forecast that both of Jack's facilities will still be in at least an adequate condition by the end of fiscal year 19, and they're both actually pretty new. The fleet expansion is one, and the which was completed, I believe, 2015, and then the Jack relocation, which was just completed this June. So. The fiscal year 2019 performance targets have not changed from fiscal year 18, and the targets for fiscal year 18 were met. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
Graham, since we're setting the goals at our current status, it seems like a case of the tail wagging the dog. Are there guidelines from the FTA for what these categories should be, rather than us just going out and assessing them and then setting them where we're at? I don't see the purpose at this point if our goals are what we have.
And that's exactly what it is. It's supposed to be what it is. You know, what you're projecting by the end of the year, which you kind of already know. It's not necessarily a goal. That's their guidelines on setting these numbers. I guess the one bit of variance would be funding. You know, some of the larger agencies may be pulling from several funding sources that may have more of a impact on how their assets could be replaced over the next year. So,
Could it be that the federal government's just looking for a way to be able to get their arms around the condition of the transit authorities across the country?
Yeah, that's part of the ultimate goal of transit asset management, is they want to get a better picture of where they stand in terms of state of good repair. They want to know what condition the assets are in that they're contributing funds to, just to see how much extra they need to try to allocate for transit and capital. So they're definitely shifting the way that they're allocating their trust fund dollars. So.
Just a little bit of a follow-up there, though. We are using the default standard that they have. So it's not like we're out of compliance or that we're doubling the useful life of the recommended answers, but we are able to actually ascertain if it's judicious to actually replace it. So it can meet the useful life, but still be extended if the vehicle's actually in good shape. I mean, you have
Sure.
the ability, it doesn't force us to take it out of the fleet.
Correct, yeah, and we can definitely adjust the target standards. We don't have to use FTA's default. For now, I think it's a good idea. I think in the past, we've kind of seen that the default FTA age is about what our vehicles are lasting, but they do allow some latitude on that for if you have unique conditions in your operating environment, you can adjust those accordingly.
If I may add also, just to say it on the record, there are no fiscal implications whether we meet the targets or not. And for our community, I think one of the biggest benefits of these target settings is really just to communicate with the board and the public kind of where we are funding-wise. We've done a good job in the past few years of setting ourselves up and replacing our vehicles, but there are transit organizations that aren't as well positioned as we are. So I think just being transparent about it and talking about it a little bit is helpful.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, seeing no public, bring it back to is it informational? No, it's proposed motion. Yeah, could I have a motion?
Sure. I move to approve the fiscal year 2019 Transit Asset Management Performance Targets as published.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Chaz? Any more discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Good. Thanks, Graham. 6B, overview of program year 2017-2018 pedestrian and bicycle monitoring results. Haley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is an overview of data collection of pedestrian and bicycle activity for the program year 2017 and 2018 of the Complete Streets Performance Monitoring Program. Per the program, staff collected baseline pedestrian and bicycle volumes for its first year of implementation. Volume was collected on 4 corridors, which are North Carson Street, Downtown Carson Street, South Carson Street, and William Street. And as a reminder, the general extent of North Carson Street is going to be Arrowhead Drive down to Corbett Street. Downtown Carson Street is Corbett Street down to 10th Street. South Carson Street is 10th Street down to Snyder Avenue. And William Street is Carson Street to Russell Way. As shown in the supporting material, pedestrian and bicycle volumes are displayed by season in order to show seasonal variations and better comparison among the corridors as average daily volumes. If you go to the pedestrian volumes, you can see that generally for the program year, Carson Street downtown had the highest number of daily volumes, followed by William Street, then North Carson Street, and lastly, South Carson Street. As expected, the summer months had the most volumes, followed by fall and spring months, with winter months with the least activity. And then if you go to bicycle volumes, you can see for the program year, North Carson Street actually ended up having slightly higher daily volumes, followed by North Carson Street downtown, then William Street, and lastly, South Carson Street. And for summer months, North Carson Street had experienced much higher daily volumes compared to the other corridors. North Carson Street bicycle counts were collected during mid-June, and staff concluded that the significant increase was due to a number of special events happening around town. Special events were Rockabilly Riot, which was June 21st to June 23rd, and in conjunction with this event was also the Carson City Sheriff's Office Extreme Motor Challenge. And in addition to these two events, Carson City Off-Road, also known as Epic Rides, was also happening from June 15th to June 17th. And this event specifically is a huge generator of pedestrian and bicycle activity. Following summer, fall and spring months had moderate volumes as expected, with winter months with the least. For winter months, Carson Street downtown and North Carson Street were omitted from the analysis. Per the program, the counters were both scheduled to be out on Carson Street downtown during the month of November, but staff had used these counters and set them up at the Kings Canyon trailhead to obtain data for the FLAP grant that Carson City was recently awarded. And likewise, the counters were scheduled to be out on North Carson Street during the month of February, but were not put out due to inclement weather and staff resources being used for other issues such as snow removal. Throughout the program year, staff worked closely with the Eco Counter support team to monitor outliers of data and counter malfunctions to educate staff on best practices. And in general, counter malfunctions occur for a number of reasons, but most likely due to weather changes such as, the sunlight hitting the counter at a certain angle near a building, or counter placement, or technology malfunctions. Moving forward, staff is continuing to work with Eco Counter to monitor and evaluate the data. That being said, the program is in its second year of data collection, and staff is continuing to monitor the data. And I also want to note that staff is planning to bring an update to the program document in November. So those are my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just have an observation. I think that this is good data, and I'm sure it will get better over time. But when you look at it, at the bike data, there's no correlation between where we have our bike paths and the counts. In fact, it's in the exact opposite order. So the best bike paths are South Carson Street and William Street, which have the lowest volumes. And North Carson Street, which basically has no bike lanes, has the highest volume. So it's really interesting to see where we put bike paths and how that translates into who's using them.
I agree, and I think it'll be interesting to see the difference between, the baseline data, so, collecting the data for a few years and, seeing how the trends may morph or so forth.
Go ahead, Jen.
So Brad brings up an interesting point, and no one rides on South Carson Street because it is dangerous and hazardous, so you're going to have very low volumes. And are we measuring the count? I mean, I recognize this is the Complete Street program, which is why we're measuring the streets, but are we measuring the paths? So in other words, did we have a counter on the bike path that is on South Carson Street?
We do, yes.
Okay, but is that what is in this data, or is that this data on the street? That's a separate data set?
It's both of the data sets combined.
Okay, so you measured bicycles on the path and on the, so the counter was then located in the stretch of South Carson Street that has the multi-use path on it?
Yes, near Fairview, the path near Fairview.
Just to clarify, so within each corridor, there's a couple of different count locations. So over time, we get a holistic view of use through that corridor. So the count location isn't in the exact same spot every time we visit that corridor with a counter. Sometimes it's on the bike path, sometimes it's on the road, to try and get a holistic understanding of the corridor. And the intent, which I'm sure you all know, when we started this, was really to get that baseline information of the corridors that were dangerous and not necessarily bicycle friendly. Right. So that when we come in with these infrastructure tax, complete streets corridor projects, then we could really assess whether use goes up. Now we have completed the downtown project, and so the counts we're getting now are for that, after snapshot. But that is, does that answer your question on the bike path road?
Maybe. If I could, so you'd expect them to be low, and when we get the extended bike path on South Carson Street, we would hope they go up, right? I mean, that's what we're getting baseline, which is what you said, and we hope to see a more ridership once the facilities are more bike friendly. I think I get that message. Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead,
Just
Lori.
a general comment. I was at a meeting last night that was dealing with data with an economist from the university, and I think it's important that we recognize that this may not really be a strong data set yet, that we're really going to need 5 years from the completion to see the fruition of whether we made the right choices. Did we put the bike things in the right places? Are we educating the people, or do people know that there's a safer route to even use a bike? But it really is going to take 5 years, because honestly, when you look at these, it doesn't give you a warm, fuzzy bike feeling. But hopefully over the future years, the numbers will grow.
Absolutely. And since Haley's taken over as our performance-based planning lead, she's really started to own this program. And what she mentioned about the monitoring program getting updated and being brought back this fall, the intent is to build upon the initial Complete Streets monitoring program, where we're really focused on those 4 corridors, and talk about how we do monitoring and performance evaluation in Campo area generally and more broadly, and really look and understand kind of those types of things of where are we monitoring and is this right, and how do we know if things are improving. So expect that in the next couple of months.
Go ahead, Jim.
How do you figure, or do you calculate the mileage, estimate the mileage that people go and the cost of building and maintaining these bike corridors? Do you correlate any of that together?
That's a great question. I think that's something folks are wrestling with nationally. Currently, we don't collect distance information for our bike riders here in Carson, but it's certainly something that might be interesting in the future.
Does the gas tax pay for all this?
Not necessarily, no. The gas tax is specifically for roadways. Generally, we use Surface Transportation Block Grant or Transportation Alternatives Program. We're looking for federal grant funding sources for these types of improvements.
Go ahead, Chad.
So maybe just to speak a little bit to that point. So this is for the Complete Streets program, and it's good information, and as Laurie pointed out, it's the very beginning of our data set. But the majority of bicyclists in Carson City don't use these corridors because they're using the paths, which we're not counting right now. So we're looking at apples and oranges here to a fairly substantial extent. So I just wanted to point that out.
The other thing that might be interesting on this is these are pure numbers, right? And so when I look at it, I think, well, North Carson Street has more vehicle traffic as well. So it might be interesting, I don't know if it'll help your decision making at all, but to see as a percentage of total traffic, what's the percentage of bike riders on that? Because it may, I don't know if it will make a difference or not, but maybe the Carson Street downtown has a much higher percentage of bike riders because it's a more friendly environment, just a guess. But we struggle with that with crashes too, right? Do we chase the highest number of crash or, per vehicle mile traveled or something like that, just to put some framework on there?
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And couldn't we put these data counters specifically and separate the reports to those that are on bike paths versus those that are in the corridor? Could we not truly get a more robust picture to say, again, yes, all the trails and all the bike paths that we're doing are truly getting us the pedestrian counts and are truly, are we making all the right decisions for the money that's of it, are we making the right decisions? And I think that's really all of us are after, is that we're putting the dollars to the best use. And so maybe we can separate out that data and capture, because I think he's probably right that we have more on the paths than the.
You're absolutely right. And I think what the benefit of seeing it in this seasonal kind of snapshot is to show that we may not have the most bicycle riders in the country, but it's not just a 3-month summer kind of temporary seasonal use. We are seeing cyclists all year round here, despite the cold weather. And now that we know there are cyclists, taking a look at how we're monitoring across the board, are these the right 4 corridors we want to limit at the monitoring, and maybe not. Maybe we want to start monitoring our paths and trails, and we probably do. So that I think we are at a good point, and we're looking forward really optimistically.
Go ahead, Sandra.
I do want to give you guys some credit for going down this path. I know, like you said, it's kind of a national issue on how do we account for bicycles and pedestrians. It's been very difficult to do automated counting, so I think this is great. Again, let's not get too caught up in what the results are, because this is the baseline, it's the first year. But I think, we may be able to set a national example for how you start to account for these other modes. So I just want to thank you guys for taking the initiative on that.
Please don't raise the bar too high.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Kindly requested.
Okay. Deal.
Lots of discussion. I actually had a couple points. One of them I thought that would be interesting. There's recreational trails and there's transportation trails, and a lot of times pathways are recreational trails, not transportation trails, so you should get Parks and Rec, instead of you loaning them too, they should be buying some and looking on stats on their bike paths to support their own interest in developing pathways in this community that are recreation oriented more than, a lot of times you get the money from transportation side, but so like North Carson, I know why there's a lot of bikes in North Carson is the gateway to Washoe Valley, and I ride out there and I see bikes all the time going out North Carson to go to Washoe Valley. So, and that's, if you go south, you're not going anywhere but up Spooner or into some heavy traffic. So I ride myself that way. So, and there's a lot of people in the hospital area that ride bikes that commute. They ride by my house every morning on the bike lanes out there. So I could see North Carson having a lot of ridership, and they're not using the bike path, which is parallel to the freeway, because they want to get a direct route and go up to the valley. So somehow, I know you don't have any, if you'd have the bike committee someday that meets, maybe we could discuss working with Parks and Rec for them to start getting good numbers to help support what you're doing to show the difference in all this discussion from today, and that would be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually just spoke with the Trails coordinator with the city, and they're actually looking to purchasing counters. And so we were going back and forth with, do you like Eco Counter? How's your experience been? So I know he's been looking into also purchasing a set of counters for the exact same reason.
Good.
And always a good reminder that Campo purchased the counters, so if Campo partners would like to borrow the counters at any time, they are always available.
Except for when we're using them. No.
Lots of discussion on the little counters. That's great. See, all the interest you brought, Haley? See? Thank you. So anybody from the public want to make comment to this? Seeing none, bring it back. That's information only. So we move on in the agenda to internal communications and administrative matters, future agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Campo opened a grant application cycle for FTA 5339 and 5310. These are transit grant funds. RTC Board will hear later tonight that Jack is seeking to apply for these funds. So next month, Campo will hear any applications received on those grant funds and make a decision for award. Campo will also hear the Transit Asset Management Plan, the TAM plan, that will talk about the plan for transit asset management for those targets that you heard tonight. So those are the two big items for next month.
Board comments. Next on, start with Lyon County. Any comments from Lyon County?
No, just reservoirs going down and the wells are going dry.
Well, that's not a happy report.
No, we're,
You have to
the
put,
water basin's over allocated by six. The water basin's over allocated by 6 times. There's a lot of paper water. If that would disappear, we would be in balance. But people paid big money for all that paper water, and we have problems.
well, that's why we live in Carson City here. See, anything, Chaz?
No.
Greg? John? Sandra?
I can't stay quiet. We had our board meeting on Monday. The board approved our 2019 work program and accepted the STIP, which is now going to Federal Highways for approval. We also presented on our One Nevada Transportation Plan, our statewide plan. I would like to request a future agenda item to present that to this committee as well. And then we continue working with Campo staff on performance measures, performance management, general planning coordination. So I just want to, again, thank staff for continued participation in that.
How did I turn that? So, sorry, no public, so essentially, we're at item 12, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved? Second. We're adjourned until
5:05.
5:05 for RTC. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission. Today is Wednesday, September 12th, 2018. We're in the Sierra Room at the Carson City Community Center. Tamar, can you call roll, please?
Chairperson Bunkowski.
Here.
Vice Chair Bagwell. Commissioner Stedfield. Commissioner Kimbrough. Commissioner McQuarrie. A quorum's present.
Thank you. Agenda management notice. The chair may take items on the agenda out of order, combine two or more items for consideration, and/or remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion at any time. We're now on agenda item 3, disclosures. Any member of the board
Mr.
that has
Chair.
any disclosures tonight?
I apologize. Can we go back to item 2? If it pleases the board, staff requests that we hear item 6D first. Before 6A.
Okay. If there are no objections, then we'll adopt the agenda as amended. Okay. All right. Then we'll move back on to item 3. Any disclosures from any members tonight? Seeing none, we are on our first public comment. Anybody from the public who are not here that would like to come up and comment? All right, moving on to approval of the minutes, item 5A, for possible action. If everybody's looked at the minutes, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of August 8, 2018 as submitted.
We have a motion, and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Passes unanimously. We are now on to item 6D, public meeting items for possible action to direct staff to allocate $160,000 of surface transportation block grant funds to a sewer and roadway improvement project on Airport Road between Douglas Drive and Woodside Drive for roadway reconstruction purposes. And this is Dirk.
Thank you, sir. So a little background on the funding source. Back in 2017, CAMPO signed an agreement with NDOT in which NDOT set aside STBG, Surface Transportation Block Grant funding. As part of CAMPO, there's an agreement between the member agencies to allocate it based on population. So there's a share of that that goes to Carson Cities. Carson City gets a little bit each year. Those portions are identified in the staff report. So what staff is asking for is to allocate $160,000 towards this project. Before I go into the details of this project, I want to kind of give you a little more history on the past projects. So a few years ago, there's $308,000 spent on a mill and overlay on Airport between Butt-Eye and 5th Street. Silver Stage, which is I think just completed construction, $710,000 went towards that. $577 is programmed to Fairview for reconstruction between Roop Street and Carson. $372 was allocated to the South Carson Street corridor, kind of enrolled up into that corridor project that we're working on now. So approximately $1.9 million in total. So staff is requesting $160,000 to be put towards this wastewater project. Right now, there's issues with conditions from the main, as well as capacity issues, and so the wastewater, as part of their capital improvement program, needs to go in there and do a replacement. As part of that project, they would have to come back and patch the road after they made utility improvements, and that patching work is about $265,000. So the thought was, if we can take some of the STBG funding, about 160, that's going to cover the difference between the $265,000 to patch, and to change that from a patching project to a reconstruction project. So, as you may know, currently the condition of that roadway is fair to poor. There's quite a bit of alligator cracking, edge cracking, and there's quite a few bad spots in that section of roadway. And so the thought was, if we wait another 5 years, that road is going to be in a worse condition, and we'll be possibly looking at a replacement at that time if funds allow then. So the thought was to try and get ahead of it and handle it now. So this will federalize the project, which means it turns it into an LPA project. Additionally, as it becomes a roadway project, there are ADA improvements which we'll need to address, and that cost, both LPA and the ADA, has been incorporated into this estimate that we gave you. So the local match, which is typically 5% with STBG funding, would not come out of RTC, but it would come out of the $265,000 that was going to go to road improvements for the patch. So if approved, the design would start immediately, fall of 2018, with construction in the summer of 2019. So from an approval process standpoint, since the project, if approved, the project would have both wastewater funds and RTC funds. So the thought was to come back when the time's right for the construction contract, was to get a recommendation from the RTC to recommend to the board, and then to have the board do the final approval on that construction contract, just because of the mix of funds. So just a little background on Airport Road. It is part of Performance District 3, which means we'd be looking at it at 2021. So I just wanted to kind of give you that information. It is classified as a collector roadway. So that concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Dirk, can the utility improvements wait until 2021? Or did you say
I don't believe so, and the reason why is because we have an extensive list, and Dan might be able to speak more to it, but this project has come to the top of the list because of the capacity issues and the condition, and so they've been pushing pretty hard on it. So I don't believe so.
Right. So I guess I should have restated the question. If the utility work can't wait, the whole purpose of this is not to have to patch the road and reconstruct it. So maybe I misunderstood you. We're not going to wait until 2021 to do the project.
Nope. The fact about the 2021 was merely a fact. Since we've kind of adopted the pavement management plan, I just kind of want to let you know when we're doing a project what district is falling under. So it's just kind of bringing that part, acknowledging it, I should say.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Just a
Lori?
thought or a comment. So I know when we adopted the payment management plan, we were clear to indicate if there were federal dollars or an emergent need, we certainly could go out of district. So I think this is a perfect example of that. We'll try to stay within the districts to have equal funding, kind of, the entire community can have access to the dollars, but this is a good project. And then I want to say, I really compliment you on looking across the system, because I know that I get a lot of complaints from people that, either you just put a road in and then we cut it to put a utility in, or the other way. And so I just want to say, I think this is the right way to do projects, and to try, if we can, the best thing you can do is marry up a utility with a road. So nice job.
Thanks for that comment. And just so you know, this is something that's throughout the department right now, and we're all focusing on it. So I do believe you're going to see more of these. And so we appreciate that comment.
Additional comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so since we are going to go into design in the fall, how did we arrive at $160,000 to go from patch to replace? And is it full width? Is it grind and overlay? Or, what are we anticipating on that?
Yeah, so the 160 is basically like if we were to do the sewer project by itself, and the cost to get in there, do the trench, patch and slurry the roadway, there's that cost. But if we were to do a full reconstruction of the entire width of the roadway, which I think we had our estimate as 4-inch AC on 8-inch base, that cost, subtracting out what it would cost us to do the patch and slurry, that's basically the 160 number that we have there.
So you're anticipating taking it down to subgrade and rebuilding the whole thing?
Yes.
Okay. That's it. I guess I'm just kind of curious, you guys feel that 160 is adequate?
Seems low.
We had that concern as well. A few folks in the department had that. So I actually met with the project manager, and we went through some of the numbers. I said, hey, let's double check these numbers. And what's happening is the patch is more expensive than the reconstruction per square foot. But we checked the numbers, and we have a preliminary cost estimate that has been worked up for the wastewater, and then in addition to the road reconstruction. So we have an estimate. It might change as we go through design, but we feel that it's conservative.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I mean, when we break it down and look at historical numbers and kind of where the market is for a patch, it's about, just in comparison sense, it's about $10 a square foot to do a patch, just because it's more precise than, you're more saw cuts, more labor, more precision, smaller equipment probably, versus a reconstruct runs at about $4 a square foot for, the 4-inch on 8-inch. So that's kind of where all the math and cost estimate checks out with that.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
You can build a whole road for 40% of what it costs to patch it.
It's the ADA part that.
I mean, in a square foot comparison.
Well, yeah, exactly. In a square foot comparison, that's the.
Well, like you were saying, it has to do with economy of scale and getting to use bigger equipment and all that stuff.
Additional comments or questions? All right, then I'll open this up for public comment. And again, we have no public, so I'll bring it back to the board and entertaining a
Motion? Okay. I move to direct staff to allocate $160,000 of surface transportation block grant funds to a sewer and roadway improvement project on Airport Road between Douglas Drive and Woodside Drive for roadway reconstruction purposes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. It's unanimous. Now we will go back to item 6A for possible action to direct staff to pursue the proposed transportation infrastructure projects for Performance District 1 as funding permits. And Dirk, this is your item as well.
Thank you, sir. So, again, I'll start off with a little history. Back in April 2018, RTC approved pavement management plan. That plan outlined a schedule, a process, priorities, and the allocation of no less than 80% of the transportation infrastructure account funds to be allocated to a district, an annual district. Priorities include roadway functional classification, safety, traffic volume, and construction efficiencies. For fiscal year 2019, District 1 is the first district, and for this year, there's about $1.1 million available. $300,000 was subtracted. Back in February of 2018, the RTC approved $300,000 towards the Curry Streetscape project. So I'm going to go through these slides a little bit as I talk, but that's just, and these slides are also part of the PowerPoint. We know that these slides don't come up that great, but so if you do want, you can turn to your packet. The first slide of the PowerPoint is just a overview of the district, and then in the upper left-hand corner, you kind of get some of the statistics. 124 lane miles. Overall, there's a 64 on a pavement PCI, which is that score of 0 to 100. And then we also kind of broke out how many regional roads there are and the local roads. Additionally, the plan also kind of prioritize pavement preservation. And that's really mainly due to it being a treatment that has more efficient use of funds. So the next slide kind of shows the board what the pavement management software generates. And what this does is this looks at the pavement condition. So it looks at the PCI, it also looks at the distresses, and it identifies what roads kind of are, if you will, eligible for or a good candidate for pavement preservation. And so at first we ran the software with looking at all the roads, so local roads and regional roads. And then we kind of did a refined one where we just had it look at regional roads. And what we wanted to do there was we wanted to see if any of the local roads kind of came above some of the regional roads. As in the regional roads, when you do the local road analysis, do the regional roads drop off for any reason? And they didn't. And so there was overlap. And so kind of as part of that, we started to move forward with coming up with projects. So, and let me back up just a little bit. On that first attachment, there's a single map that shows kind of the projects that we're proposing tonight. So that might help. I'll show it again. But so this map shows you the functional classification. Your green roads are your arterial roads, and the orange color roads are your collector roadways, and then the gray ones are the local roads. So then we applied volume data. We get this volume data from NDOT. It is really good data. They've been doing it for a number of years. They have seasonal factors and all that good statistical stuff in there. And so we do feel confident on these numbers. But one thing to note is that College kind of sees a lot of traffic. It kind of comes above all the other the dark green dots. It has some red and orange. So you can kind of tell that there's a significant amount of traffic that's using College Parkway. What we did here was we overlaid our ADA transition plan. 2014, 2015, there was a ADA transition plan where we had a consultant look at some sidewalk corridors, signalized intersections, and transit stops. So by looking at some of this, we got to see what roads they were on for District 1. And the thought is when you go and you do a road improvement, you're going to be also making ADA improvements. And when you make ADA improvements, it's really good to show that you're making progress to your transition plan. So this map is a capital improvement project for Public Works. It is a long-term. Not everything on this map is approved, but what this shows you is that we are coordinating with utilities. We don't want to put a new road down and have it ripped up. And so there were some roads in here that kind of said, hey, how does this road look? But if we didn't have funding from a utility standpoint, we started moving our eyes onto a different road that wasn't going to have that conflict. So this map shows you a condition assessment of the projects that we're looking at. The green color is really going to tell you, hey, this road is really a good candidate for pavement preservation. It's in the zone of you're getting a good bang for your buck. It's efficient use of funding. The yellow color is going to show you, hey, there might be some corrective maintenance that we have to handle. There might be some patching or some crack filling, crack repairs. So, but for the most part, we see quite a bit of green, which is good when we're dealing with pavement preservation. So this is kind of how we prioritize the projects. As I noted earlier, the priorities, we tried to add a numeric value and then ranked the projects. And so up top in the gray is the name of the project, College Parkway. And then you have below that is the extent. So for example, College Parkway between Carson and Airport. Then you get a few statistics on that section of roadway, the average PCI, the square footage, the length, and the age. And then you kind of just see how things got scored, from a conceptual level. And then you see the score at the bottom. And so the thought here is to show you how these projects got scored, and as we move forward with design, if we come up with funding issues, we might have to scale back on the project, but the thought is to really focus on the high priority projects, then move down the list. So in following with the pavement management plan, we are looking at, if approved, starting design as soon as possible. And then in around January or February, we would have these construction contracts advertised, which is a good time right before the season gets busy and all that type of good stuff. And then construction could start as soon as March in 2019 and then possibly continue into the summer depending on the timing of the projects. I do also want to add that this presentation was also presented to traffic. We did receive support for these projects, and so that we felt confident moving forward with these projects after that. So that concludes my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dirk, we recently did a half-road improvement on Gonai. Was that between Arrowhead and Conbear?
To the north, yeah.
Right, so that's on the map, that shows as the worst section of road. And so I'm just curious, this pavement management index, is it only measuring then the other half of the road, or is it measuring the whole road? And are we reconstructing the half of the road that we just did?
Let me back up. So this picture is going to show you a little bit of the conditioning of the roadway. And we had questions about this too. We had an inspector go out there and look at it, and this is an average condition, for the section. On our collector and our Taylor roadways, we did 2 passes. So this is a 2-lane road, so we got good sampling here. We don't know if what we discussed internally is that there seems to be more distresses in the southbound travel lane, and the thought is that the trucks that are coming out, that's when they're weighted down, and so you might have one section of road that is deteriorating with multiple distresses, and then you have the northbound, which doesn't have too many distresses, but we do, there might be more distresses that are happening. The pavement management software does look at distresses, and how it does its analysis. It identifies distresses that might be mitigated with a rehabilitation, such as a mill and overlay versus a rehab. So that's something that when we get into the design, we'll really look into what's happening. We'll core the roadways and see what's happening in the subgrade, and that will really dictate what type of treatment, whether it's going to be a rehabilitation or reconstruction. So I don't know
I would just add to that pavement condition index informs project selection, but certainly we will go out and design it appropriately, and we would never tear out something that just got redone.
Well, and I believe it is the southbound lane that was reconstructed. So I don't know if you have any additional information, Darren, but, I'm just curious if that was a project that we did an overlay on, that maybe the base was not in good shape. I'm just wondering how the road can be in this poor of a condition if we just did improvements to it like a year ago.
Yeah, I think, and I apologize, I didn't review this before the meeting today, but I think what, we have to look at this specific data. So specifically right there, that it was a small section of roadway that we improved. It wasn't the whole length of it. And what is happening right there? Can it just be, can we put an overlay, or a thin coat on top, or does it have to be completely torn out? I was out there within the last 6 months, and I remember thinking it looked really good to me. So I think it's what they're saying. We have to get our eyes in the field when we go to build a project, our eyes in the field, and see specifically what has to be done there. But Commissioner, I'm very, very, very hopeful that it's not, something that was done a year and a half ago doesn't need to be tore out and redone. That would surprise me immensely, but I don't have the facts right here in front of me.
If we could look into that, because we had a cost sharing.
That's correct.
Agreement on that, and so I want to make sure we don't have any issues in there if we have to redo that work.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Or if this is a different section.
Right.
We didn't do
maybe
all
it's a
of
different section.
Gonai, so.
Well, it was from. It should
Right.
be from. I think Emerson down to Arrowhead was the section that was reconstructed, the southbound lane.
That was my first comment when I came up here. Is I wasn't prepared to speak on it, so I can't remember exactly what those limits
And
were.
see
but
what
we'll.
this is really
Yes, we
referring
would look at that.
Right, it says it is.
Yeah. Maybe the map is not.
Dead on
Yeah.
to what we're talking about.
If you could check on that and send us an email, that would be great, just as a follow-up.
Will do.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? Lori?
Just in general, because we have the one slide that shows we have 124 miles in District 1. So these proposed projects equal how many miles? So is that a 5% of the mileage will get done? I couldn't see that anywhere. It was telling square footage, but
I'll include that in my email. That's a great question.
that would be great, just so
Yeah.
that we in the future can be able to, because again, remember, I think we want to educate the public that, we have $1 million a year, and that's only going to get, you're in District 1 through 5, so that already puts you out 5 years for your area, and then your area might only get 5% of your road. So if we could add the mileage, that would be super.
They're in square feet, linear feet.
Right, I'm just asking him to update where he has the little legend that puts 124 and put the proposed.
0.59 miles.
0.59, that's it, half a mile. But again, I think people will, wow,
Five-
that's $700,000.
5 miles.
No,
Huh?
it's just 5 miles.
5 miles, not
I'll
0.5.
provide that, and I'll provide the percentage of the
Right.
district, which would be interesting.
I just
So-
think education is always a good tool. That's $700,000, right.
And we also want to be very transparent that we want to provide enough projects to you, RTC, tonight to give staff the go-ahead, but it's likely more work than we can pay for with even $1 million, so that, 5 miles may actually turn into 4 miles, or, once we start doing design, that GONI reconstruction might drop off.
Additional questions, comments?
Yeah, I have.
Greg?
A couple quick ones. Noticing that Hot Springs Road from Carson to Roop has a PCI of 84 and 30-year-old pavement. That surprises me.
I believe in our database, the year was defaulted to a year that when they entered all the information into the program, they didn't know. In discussions with some of our inspectors, I believe there was a mill and overlay recently, which would not change the age of the roadway, and so I believe that's why that's the reason for that kind of issue. Yeah.
Okay. And I had another question. You had one graphic that had the capital or Public Works capital improvement projects. So, there's a lot of water work, between Sherman and, actually on Sherman and Nye. When the water and sewer guys get going, how do they come to you guys for oversight on how we're gonna, pave back, and, are we gonna do, half street, or, how does that work?
There is communication. We typically have meetings prior to projects, and we do discuss this. We've recently put together a map in a kind of a GIS format so we can see this stuff, so that everyone has it at their fingertips. But for example, the Airport Road, it was on at top of someone's list. We meet internally, we chat, and it came up as, hey, the pavement is also not in great condition. So that collaboration is taking place, and we are currently developing tools as part of our asset management program which we are improving, but it's something that's going to continue to happen. But we do meet internally right now. It kind of takes place as a meeting, but we're working on streamlining that process.
Darren Schultz for the record. In terms of what specifically we patch with a utility project, we treat ourselves like we treat developers. So if a developer goes out there and puts a pipe in for their development, what's required there, we do the same things for our utility. So sewer is not going to pay for any more or any less than we would require a developer to do if they were putting a new line in. So that patch can vary depending on where it sits up in the alignment of the street. If it's right in the middle of a lane, we require the whole lane to be patched, for instance. So that varies, depends on the project, but we treat the sewer utility just like we would a development project. The rules are the same.
Yeah, good. That's what I would hope.
So, this is nice job. It's really hard to explain to the public where we really stand with roadways, and I would hope with traffic, I hope a bunch of light switches went off. I'm really pleased that there's 2 Board of Supervisors sitting on this commission, because this is huge. Next year, we're looking at 5 miles of road, and it's just one district. 5 years from now, people are going to need 4-wheel drives to get down some other streets, you'd think. I mean, because it just keeps getting worse, and nobody has really screamed or yelled yet about this. But this is the perfect way. Yeah, I know, they hear it. I don't hear that. But it's just phenomenal for me when you got it like this. You show a graph and it's very clear, and if somebody comes into the board and says, hey, my road hasn't been touched, well, this is the process, this is the money, this is, let's figure. So I'm really appreciative of this and hope that traffic stays in the loop and that you're doing everything you can to keep the public informed that this is what the reality of the road situation is in this community, like most others in this state. And it challenges these 2 board members to how we move beyond that, if ever. So thank you for all this work and effort. This is great.
So Dirk, there are 2 additional sewer projects planned, one on Arrowhead, one on College. So are those projects going to be coordinated? So if you look again at the Performance District 1 Anticipated Public Works Capital Improvement Projects on the CIP list, it shows a small sewer project east of Gonai, and then it shows a project on College Parkway just east of Carson Street. So are those going to be coordinated so that they're finished prior to any work that we do on the streets?
Correct. There's actually 3 of them, the 2 that you named, and then there's also one that's hard to see because of all the lines, but on Hot Springs, right at the south end. But absolutely, we're going to begin discussions with them, and we will make sure not to put down any pavement that's going to need to get ripped up.
Any additional comments or questions, discussion? All right, we'll open this up to public comment. And once again, no public has shown up. So I will bring this back to the commission and entertain a motion.
I move to direct staff to pursue the proposed transportation infrastructure projects for Performance District 1 as the funding permits, with a really good look at that Gonai Road project.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The vote is unanimous, and I would just like to thank staff. This is really good data, and I intend to keep it in my office so that when I get calls, which I get on a regular basis from people saying, why aren't you taking care of the streets? Generally now, I sit down and spend 30 minutes to try to explain it to them, and this is going to be really helpful, So if you could email this to me, that'd be great. Then I can keep it electronically and send it out to people.
Mr. Chair, if I might add, if, the payment management plan was intended to be a living document, if you will. And this is our first year of implementation. So my intent here is to be absolutely transparent with the board, members of the public, stakeholders on why we're spending our transportation dollars where we're spending them. So if folks look at the data and the maps and the criteria that we're looking at, and there's still questions on why certain decisions were made, please let us know. We absolutely want to be as transparent as possible, because it shouldn't be a guessing game why we spend our dollars where we do. And so we appreciate any feedback that comes now or later.
Well, and I'm specifically thinking of the correspondence that you and I got from the gentleman up in Lakeview. It's like, why don't you fix my streets? It's like, you're so far down the priority list. Here, look at this, and this shows you what the funding is that we have and the amount of streets we have to fix and how quickly the money runs out. All right, moving on to item 6B for possible action to adopt a resolution authorizing the filing of an application for a Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 grant under 49 U.S.C. Chapter 53, and to authorize the RTC chair to sign the FTA fiscal year 2018 certifications and assurances section of the RTC application for 5310 funds. Graham, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the announcement of the availability of the federal fiscal year 2018 apportionment of 5310 grant funds, staff is planning to submit an application to CAMPO for possible award. The FTA 5310 grant program provides funds for projects intended specifically for meeting the needs of seniors and individuals with disabilities. And since the entire Jack fleet is ADA accessible, any funds awarded are planned for use as what is called capitalized operating assistance. This will essentially provide the RTC with a better federal match amount and extend the life of our local matching funds. I'll also note that the applications for this and the next agenda item would, if approved by RTC, be presented to CAMPO at the next meeting, the October meeting, as part of the competitive selection process. So any applications received in addition to this would be subject to award of funding by CAMPO. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions or comments from the commission members? Lori.
I just had the question, I notice it's really on both of them, on page 13, it indicates that we have Douglas County as a service area. And so if you could just, is that an error, is that a future, or do we have a street in Douglas County?
Yeah,
I'm like, is there one street
Yeah,
or something?
It's kind of
Right.
like that. That is accurate. The Jack Transit System does serve Douglas County. It is not currently served by fixed route, but it is served by the paratransit service area, which is a 3/4 mile buffer around where the fixed routes are, and that's federally required. So we do spill over a little bit into northern Douglas County. It goes probably about halfway between Topsy and Jacks Valley Road. So there is a little chunk of Douglas County that is served currently by Jack.
And what was the reason for that again? So if you live in Douglas County up to Jacks Valley, so if I'm on Micah Drive, I can call for a paratransit only, not fixed route?
We don't quite make it all the way to Micah Drive right now,
Okay.
but yes, the service area for paratransit is federally dictated. It has to be at least 3/4 of a mile
From each fixed route?
beyond where the fixed routes end. So we have a map where it shows the buffer all the way around the system. It kind of follows the lines of the fixed route, and it's 3/4 beyond that. So.
So the fixed route goes down to the Costco right now and turns around. So the federally required paratransit buffer is 3/4 of a mile south of that. So that's why we check the box of Douglas, because the service in general already is within Douglas County, even though the fixed route is not.
Do we have any actual service that we're doing there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have a lot of people either employed or who just want to go shopping, or there might even be a couple doctor's offices down there in those two large plazas off of Topsy.
Well, not for shopping, right, on the well, I guess the paratransit can take them for that too, right?
Yep.
Huh, okay.
So if we were to extend the route, which we've talked about, down to Topsy, then that's also going to affect the paratransit and
That's
would
correct.
push that probably all the way down to Micah Drive.
That's correct.
So we would need to take those effects into account as well when we look at the extension
Absolutely.
of that route, because it's going to include a pretty big service area. It would include Sunridge and a portion of Indian Hills.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Additional questions or comments?
That was enlightening.
Yeah. Good catch, huh?
Yeah,
I was
really.
reading this going, wait a minute.
Star on your chart.
We'll open this up for the non-existent public comment and bring it back to,
I'll make the motion.
all right.
Move to adopt a resolution authorizing the filing of an application for a Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 grant under the 49 USC Chapter 53, and to authorize the RTC Chair to sign the FDA Fiscal Year 2018 certifications and assurances section of the RTC application for 5310 funds.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The vote is unanimous. And I joke about public comment, but I'm trying to make a point that it would be really appreciated if some of the public would actually show up. Like, they show up when something happens that they don't like. It'd be nice if they showed up when we're talking about items and making decisions. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and we'll move on to item 6C for possible action to adopt a resolution authorizing the filing of an application for a Federal Transit Administration Section 5339 grant under 49 U.S.C. Chapter 53 and to authorize the RTC chair to sign the FTA fiscal year 2018 certifications and assurances section of the RTC application for 5339 funds. Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is quite similar to the previous one, only this application is for a different federal funding source. This is the Section 5339 funds. The 5339 grant program provides capital funding for buses and bus-related facilities. Any funds awarded as a result of this grant application would go towards the purchase of replacement paratransit vehicles for the JAC fleet. And however, even if the RTC receives the requested $133,626, additional funding sources would be required for the purchase. An existing 5307 grant is currently available to be combined with the 5339 funds for the purchase. The vehicles are not scheduled for purchase this fiscal year, and the RTC will have an opportunity to review a contract when it is in place prior to purchase. I'd also like to note an error at the bottom of the first page of the staff report. The final bullet where it says $172,793, the $146,874 is from the 5307 funds that I just mentioned. The information is accurate in the explanation of fiscal impact section, but I should note that change there on the first page. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Go ahead, Lori.
Just want to clarify, the $146,874 in the 5307 funds, we already have that secured.
That's correct.
So we're just going to balance it forward to be able to put it all together to buy the buses.
That's correct.
And we have several years when we get a grant award or something to expend the money.
Yeah, once they release the apportionments, you have 3 years to apply for it, and then once you have applied for it and they approved it, you basically have forever to expend it, but they do like to see that progress is being made, so I don't know, I'm sure at some point they'd cut you off, but we do have grants open from several years ago, but that we're still expending the funds on certain projects, so we don't.
That's interesting. It's interesting that they actually let us apply for a grant that might take us 5 years to expend. That's kind of interesting, but okay.
As an overall comment, which I know you're aware, we, as a general comment, we have ample FTA funding as part of the JAC service, but are limited in what we're able to do with a limited local match.
Additional questions or comments? Public comment? Still no public. I'll bring it back to the commission and entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I'll move to accept a resolution authorizing the filing of an application for a Federal Transit Administration Section 5339 grant under 49 U.S.C. Chapter 53, and to authorize the RTC chair to sign the FTA fiscal year 2018 certifications and assurances section of the RTC application for 5339 funds.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The vote's unanimous. And we will move on to agenda item 7, internal communications and administrative matters, non-action items. We will start with item 7A, transportation manager's report. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I already embarrassed Carissa enough, but I would encourage you to reach out to her, get to know her. She managed the 7-county Safe Routes to School program in Florida, so she has a lot of good experience with a wide area. The Western Nevada Safe Routes to School program is a 4-county it's a big program now, and we work closely with NDOT and go out into the rural areas. So her experience that she's bringing in that realm, she's bringing a lot. She also brings GIS and some active transportation planning experience. So in the next year, looking at some mapping updates to our regional transportation plan for active transportation maps, working with the Parks Department and taking a look at any needed updates to the Unified Pathways Master Plan and some other things. I can't state enough how excited we are to have her on board.
But has she registered for the Carson City Off-Road for next year?
She's only been here a week, so we're trying to give her a few days. The second update, I did want to circle back with this board. There have been several public comments and comments from this board in previous discussions on the bumpiness of our on-street bike lanes over the past couple of months. As directed by this board, we did circle back. I have had a meeting with heads of other MPOs across the state and NDOT. There's an operations managers group is what it's called, and we meet once a month. I brought this item up there, and I said there's concerns. I asked what others have done. There was a suggestion that came from NDOT and Washoe. There was a chip seal done on a facility in North Washoe Valley going into Hidden Valley. It was a big roadway job. And what they did there was it's almost like a double treatment, if you will, and it makes it a little bit smoother, reportedly. Then I took that information back. Dirk organized a meeting with city staff and University of Nevada, Reno pavement group. We met to discuss it. We asked the question about that specific treatment or other treatments that they were aware of. They did highlight that recent project as a great example. However, in our case, time after time, unfortunately, it comes back to money. The condition of our roadways, the bike lanes, on-street bike lanes, will never be less bumpy and better than the condition of our roadways generally. And so while staff will continue to seek out treatments that improve the ride quality, it is what it is, unfortunately. I would again like to highlight that we did have 2 of our street sweepers down this summer. And I think that truly that contributed to a lot of the comments that we heard. Those sweepers are back up, and those kind of the rocks and things that had built up over time, I'm confident that those will go back to normal, and that hopefully those comments were due to that sweeper issue. So I did want to circle back with what I found. Not a lot of good news, if you will, but folks elsewhere in the state do receive complaints like that as well. So that concludes my manager's report, available for any questions you might have.
Questions on the manager's report? No, Chad? Comment? Greg?
I'm just curious what the double treatment was. Did they slurry after they put the chip seal down? Or do you know?
I think it was a change in the type of, or the size of the rock. And so I think that you had a more coarser one on the bottom, and then the one on top was more smaller to make it smoother. So that's...
I think they said it was a double chip seal with different sized aggregates, and then they went even with the third layer of a slurry on top. It was this layered approach that UNR touted as a great innovative thing, and they brought pictures to the meeting, and it was great, but then it did come down to money at the end for us.
Just to thank you for following up on that and looking at that, and that's a bummer.
Yeah, we didn't like the answer.
We wanted a good answer to figure out how to do that. But thank you very much, and you went right to the right place to find out that question. And maybe Chaz has a secret way.
Well, I don't have a secret way, but I've been pondering this since I ride around the town. And the actual travel lane gets better over time with the type of slurry seals. Well, they're more than a slurry. I always get the types muddled up, but it's the sort you use on College Parkway and most of the other applications. With lots of vehicles running over it, they actually get smoother. And the bike lane doesn't, because it just doesn't get that much traffic, and bicycles are light and wimpy, not big and heavy. So I was just wondering, it sort of comes back to the actual construction of them. And I think what happens in the construction is all the ripples get pushed to the edge, right in the bike lane, right up against the gutter. And so if there's some way the city could, Public Works could work with the contractor, and I don't know if you put it in the specifications or just work with them as a practice of how they actually apply the slurry, it might help a little bit, but I recognize that it's not going to be like the travel lane.
I appreciate the comments, and I will continue to pass them on. I take your comments and the vast public's very seriously. One comment that I did get some pushback from the operation folks on, you don't want to make the road too smooth because then it creates a safety issue. So from an operations folks' perspective, I did get pushback on why I would even want that. So it did take a little bit to start getting solution oriented, but we will continue to ask questions and do what we can for all roadway users.
Yeah, I would say those guys don't ride bikes then.
That's right.
Additional questions, comments? Seeing none, we will move on to item 7B, Street Operation Activity Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item to note, this is the new fiscal year for this specific report. It lags a couple of months. So you'll see those running totals on the right-hand column start at 0 again. So this is summertime now, even though as humans we're now in fall. This report is July. So July, typical things, weed abatement, sidewalk and flat work when those temperatures are good for that kind of work. We did do some shoulder work over on Airport Road, and we did repair 100 feet of shoulder on Timberline. This week and next week, we are doing some work up there in Lakeview. Chairperson Bonkowski, just so you are aware, we did get some calls, and we have gone up there, and our street maintenance crews are trying to do what they can on some of those potholes and shoulders getting ready to go into winter. So those are my comments on this report. Happy to answer any questions.
Some of the Lakeview issues are caused by tree roots, and there's not a whole lot we can do about that.
That is correct.
Questions or comments on the Street Operation Activity Report? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the project status report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to touch on the South Carson Street Complete Streets project. This project, there was two items actually that went to the Board of Supervisors last week. One was independent cost estimator and ICE contract that will independently look at costs as we move forward. The second was a contract with Kimley Horn for design of the roundabout. And this there was some good discussion at the board meeting, I think, on the roundabout location. I did not attach, but it exists, and I wanted to make all of you aware of it. Staff did contract independently with Traffic Works to take a second look at the roundabout location on the South Carson Street project and whether it was truly in the best interest of Carson City with current and future predicted traffic volumes and land uses to have the roundabout at Sonoma Street. Traffic Works looked at that thoroughly. They evaluated every single intersection from 10th Street down to Roland, and the recommendation that came out of that report for a variety of reasons, including bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, safety reasons, allowing a future connection to Curry Street, and providing an opportunity for a gateway into downtown, the Stewart Street location was selected as the preferred roundabout location. So that report is contained as late material in last week's Board of Supervisors meeting. It has also been posted onto the CAMPO website. Starting in the next couple months, we're going to transition the South Carson Street project information over to the Carson Proud platform, which is where we do most of the infrastructure complete streets projects, like the Curry Street that's up there right now. So you'll start seeing everything over there, but for now that report is posted on the website. Staff are available to answer any questions that you might have. I just want to mention it at this meeting.
And it is a very thorough report.
One point, it is not posted on the website yet because Dirk has not given it to Haley to upload. So I will be doing that tomorrow morning, but it will be available.
Thank you for the correction. It was very thorough. You know, we take the consideration for roundabouts very seriously, and we want to make sure it's the right thing for Carson City. Silver Stage Drive reconstruction, this concluded. They were targeting by Labor Day, and they met that target. Of all road jobs since I have worked here at Carson City, I got the fewest angry phone calls that I have ever received, which is 0. So the crews that were out there and the inspectors, they really ran this really well. I hope that you experienced it the same way. Carissa went out and drove it on her bike since she's been here, and her comments on it were that the bike lanes were smooth and large. So very positive. The battery backup improvements and those retro-reflective backplates, you'll see them all over town. The current purchase and that current contract, they've all been installed. I didn't have a chance to circle back with James Jacklet, who managed that project, to understand next steps, but he's moving forward and he managed it really well. So you should see all those up there, and let us know if you have any questions. The Carson City Freeway Multi-Use Path Project to Colorado Street. The project is in design. We're targeting construction next summer, and we are on schedule. The Fairview Drive Reconstruction Project, I believe I mentioned this at a previous RTC meeting, but Supervisor Bagwell, your comments earlier related to coordinating across divisions within Public Works. We're trying to do the same thing here on Fairview Drive. We're trying to add a water line upgrade component to this project. There's also some stormwater improvements, and so we're working with NDOT on how to craft that LPA agreement with them to make sure that we're digging once and we're doing a good job and we're stretching city dollars. So I believe that LPA agreement will come next month. It's been kind of lingering, but that's the reason. And we're moving forward with that.
So Lucia, the Fairview Drive preservation project as opposed to the reconstruction project probably generated the most calls that you've ever received to complain about that. That job was not handled well by the contractor, and in part because their equipment kept breaking down. Are there remediation measures in our contracts that deal with that? Do we have the ability for any recourse when we're working with the contractor and they cause these kinds of problems?
That's a great question. So you are right. I did receive the most calls. The calls were in large part due to the contractor. They did have a lot of breakdowns. They've noted it was an unprecedented amount of breakdowns. The city's specs, there are thresholds for different things. From the testing that was done, all of the aggregate size and all of those things were within spec. However, city staff have continued to go out and test different sections, and there are a couple of sections that we've identified that are not up to city standard. And so tomorrow, Rick Cooley, our operations manager, will be sending a letter to the contractor, and there's a few items for remediation that the city's actually going to request.
Looks like the section right before to the just east side of the 580 on the overpass is one section that is not up to standards.
That's correct. The east side and also the west side. It's my understanding that may have had to do with night work and lighting and them not being able to see certain things, but that's speculation on my part. But we are going to request a slight amount of remediation.
Great, thank you.
The Kings Canyon Trailhead Improvements and Roadway Reconstruction Project. I did want to note 2 typos in here. You should still be able to see the dollar amounts, but that's $150,000 from the RTC fund and $35,350 from the Quality of Life Open Space Fund. We have moved forward with the feds here on this one. If you remember, they manage these flat projects, and we're starting to kick off public outreach. In the next week or two, we're going to start notifying the property owners and really getting them involved. There's also going to be outreach with the Forest Service. And truly, this is a great partnership between transportation and the Parks and Open Space group. We're bringing along the Open Space Commission. The chair there, Bruce Scott, has been in contact with us, and it's a good partnership so far. So really positive things on that side. While we're talking about Kings Canyon, that box culvert replacement with the FEMA money there at Canyon Road, that work's going to start next week. So we're moving forward with that as well. The Stewart Street Pedestrian and Signal Project, this is the one that NDOT's doing. If you remember, Lori Campbell from NDOT came and did a great presentation a couple months ago. We are still on schedule for this fall, and Dirk is working closely with their staff. And finally, the CDBG College Parkway improvements. We are going through environmental clearances right now on this project. The SHPO process is taking a little bit longer, but we're making things happen and lining things up. So we're hoping to bring the contract to RTC this fall. That concludes those comments. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will move on to board comments. Chaz?
Future agenda items?
Oh, sorry, 7D, future agenda items. Go ahead, Lucia.
RTC for October, hoping to get that STBG funding agreement for the Fairview reconstruction, if not in October, certainly in November. And most likely, this body will receive a 30% design update on the South Carson Street project from our city engineer.
Good.
So for a future agenda item, and it's not a big hurry or emergency to pull it together or anything, but can we have a report on updated traffic counts? You know, when we went and put in I-580, it was with expectations on what was going to happen on Carson Street. And so I think the public would be interested just to see, did we hit the targets, not that, but get it as a report.
I try not to give Dirk kudos because I don't want him to get a big head, but he did give me, there is a report on my desk from him.
Oh, you're ready.
So we will add it to the
Perfect.
October agenda, and Dirk would love to
Put it out
present
for the
it.
public. Thank you.
Yeah, spoiler
Thank you.
alert, I think it was like a 60% reduction.
Spoiler, yeah, the numbers that I don't know if we came and shared numbers before. Those numbers do not change. They do annual counts, and so for 2017, the numbers that we have, we're taking after the freeway, and so we won't get new numbers until 2019 springtime.
But you have the numbers of what it was before, because that's what I'm looking at, is for them to say, okay, whatever.
Correct.
Average daily trips or the high peak time was 1,700 northbound, so many southbound, and now it's X.
We'll go into those details on the peak hours and everything next month.
Yeah, I think it, again, just so that we always are looking at what we project, what we think we're accomplishing when we make decisions, and then come back and say, hey, we got pretty close. And I think this one we actually got pretty close. Yeah.
Is that it, Brad? Is that it?
You done?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm, don't know if I'm gonna get myself in trouble here or not, but I sat on a meeting a few years ago with NDOT for Highway 50s that comes in front of Mills Park and the redesign, and a lot of thought of how that entranceway might happen. And I was a big advocate then, and I would like to be more of an advocate now, because I saw an ad for all those apartments that they're building there next to Long Street, and they're advertising you can take your kids to Mills Park, and there's no crossing anywhere near any part of that street. And I hate to sit and wait till we lose some young, it's one of our children or something, crossing there with their skateboard or some goofy thing across all of that traffic. And I have seen nothing in the plans for NDOT or anybody for us to fix that by requiring fences or something to stop, or at least some way of figuring out how to get kids across that street from that new complex right there with Starbucks or somewhere in there, some crossing, some way. And I'd like to see it on a future agenda item just because I want to be an advocate. And I think this board is the one that needs to make at least some suggestions. I think it's an NDOT thing, but I think we can advocate, or maybe there's ways we can work with that. So I just want to see if we can keep that somewhere out here, looking at it all the time before somebody has a really serious problem on that piece of highway.
Yeah, it's our street.
It's us.
Right,
It
it's
is
our problem.
It is our street.
Isn't there a future plan for a crosswalk at State Street?
There are future plans for bike and ped improvements all up and down that corridor with the Williams Street project. I think some of those things folks have been trying to wait to get it with the bigger project. We don't want to do anything that'll end up getting ripped up. But it's a great comment. We'll look into it and bring back an agenda item in the future.
And certainly the traffic counts with that. And maybe when you're doing the traffic counts if you have them for that, because what I'm getting is thinking that Fairview has been reduced, right, all the way up. So Fairview, Main Street, but I see huge traffic coming in on Highway 50, huge amounts. So I know one of the thought processes at one time was to narrow those lanes, but I'm thinking traffic has exponentially increased there because of all the other changes we've made. Anyway, I really think we're going to need some traffic
You're
answers.
thinking of a recommendation from the Greening
The
America.
Greening of
grant, but
America.
That wasn't our planners. That was a
I know.
recommendation made to us, but I don't know that
Well, I'm
we
just,
would ever agree to
but
that.
I think it fits with what Mark's saying. I think we're the right committee to look at the overall wait a minute, what are the counts, but what could we do to effectuate safety? Because I agree.
Yeah, that recommendation didn't look at southbound Carson Street traffic
Right.
turning and
Well, that's
going
right.
down
That's the
Stewart
committee I
Street.
was working- That's
right?
right. I remember that.
And with the USA Parkway, we really think that's having a significant impact on traffic coming in from that direction. So again, we'll look at those counts and I'll include that in my report.
Quick question about the same deal. Is there an aversion to doing a mid-block crosswalk? And the reason I say that is,
Traffic.
well, it does, but, you know, I'm just thinking if you throw some striping down and a couple of the solar signs, flashers, you know, that's a fairly, yeah. Yeah, I think you could do some fairly inexpensive interim things to maybe, you know, at least have something out there before the big project comes along.
These are all good comments, and I think we'll have to look at them.
Yeah, and we would note for the record that there is one fatality at that location already, pedestrian, doing exactly what you were talking about, trying to cross the street at early in the morning when it was still dawn. Yeah. Okay. Any other future agenda items? Okay. Then we will move on to agenda item 8, board comments. I'll try this again. Chaz? Lori?
Nope.
Mark? Nope. Okay.
Said enough.
All right. The next meeting? Nope, not there yet either. This agenda's been posted. Agenda item 9, okay, we'll move past that. Agenda item 10, next meeting is tentatively scheduled for 4:30 Wednesday, October 10th, right here, immediately after the CAMPO meeting. Agenda item 11, public comment, final public comment. Come on, no? Come on up. Come on up to the table, have a seat.
I'm just not here.
Yeah, I know.
I thought I would just.
So go ahead and push the button on the mic and identify yourself for the record, please.
Sure, Louis Lem from Nevada DOT. I just wanted to mention with what was mentioned about US 50 that folks at NDOT are aware of the increase in traffic on US 50, and we'd be happy to maybe talk with you about the situation. With some increase in traffic, there's been obviously safety issues going out from Carson City. There was some accidents just in the last few days. So I think it might be a good idea if we can sort of have some conversations, see what we can make some progress. Thank you.
Thank you. No additional public comment, so we're on agenda item 12.
Move for adjournment.
Thank you, sir. We are adjourned. Thank you all for participating.